The Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing this meeting tonight. For those of you who do not attend our meetings regularly, I wanted to introduce my colleagues, my councillor colleagues here on my right, and we will be making the decisions on the cases in front of us this evening. And on my left are our planning officers who've prepared the papers, so thank you very much for doing that. There's a lot of work that goes into doing that, so thank you. And they will be offering us their professional advice to help us make our decisions. So, turning to the agenda, are there any apologies for absence? Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest? So I would like to declare that I know many of the residents who have commented on 20A Pembroke Square. This is in my ward, and I will therefore recuse myself, and Councillor North has very kindly agreed to chair this item. Councillor Lane. Sorry, a bit of a malfunction going on here. I can't turn mine off, so he can't turn his on. Okay, sorry about that. Resetting the system.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Just to say in relation to agenda item number 116, 44 Victoria Road, it is located in my ward. I know some of the objectors. However, I'm coming to this with an open mind and will make a decision solely based upon the considerations we hear tonight. So I believe that I can still sit on that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Are there any other declarations? No. So, minutes to sign off. These are minutes from the 8th of July. I was chairing this meeting, so I'm okay with these minutes. Committee, can I sign these off? Now, the order of play for this evening is as listed in the speakers list. So at the appropriate moment, I will ask the objector and then the applicant to speak to the committee. And each objector or supporter will have 3 minutes, or where there's a group, share the 3 minutes. But there is an opportunity afterwards for the committee to ask questions. And we are quite strict about who can speak when, and you have to be registered to speak, and we don't have any discussions outside of those very set times. So we're going to start with the application at 80 Old Church Street. And over to you, Jess. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before you this evening is an application at 80 Old Church Street. This is the site plan, and the application is for a basement extension with front and rear light wells, conversion of the garages, a side extension at ground floor level, a rear extension at ground floor level, the creation of a roof terrace, and other alterations such as dormer windows and roof lights. This is an aerial view of the site. You can see the site is at the end of this terrace here and next to a listed building at number 66 to 68 Old Church Street. This is a view to the rear. You can see the garages to the rear of the garden, and then the property fronting onto Old Church Street. This is the existing basement plan. So the property does benefit from a basement underneath the property at this moment. This is the existing ground and first floor plans. Here you can see the garages, the rear garden, and then the main property. These are the existing elevations. So the front elevation on the left and the rear elevation on the right. This is the existing section on the left and the proposed section on the right, which shows the basement to be proposed underneath the dwelling and the front and rear gardens. This is the proposed basement plan. Officers considered that the basement meets the requirements of policy CD11. This is the proposed ground and first floor plan. Here you can see the light well to the front of the property with the dashed X over it, the light well to the rear, the side extension, the infill extension to the side of the property, and the conversion of the garage, which is linked through that side extension. The first floor plans below show the extent of the terrace above that new side extension, and the green roofs proposed to the latter part of that side extension and the converted garage with the lantern skylight. These are the proposed elevations. So on the left, you can see the basement areas below ground, and then the front elevation, you can see the small infill to the side and also the proposed new dormer window to the front. And to the rear, you can see the section through the basement, through the side extension, and then those railings to the rear light well. So that concludes the slides. Officers have reviewed the application and have found that the basement, as I've said, is in compliance with CD11. The external alterations and extensions are considered to be acceptable in regard to the conservation area and the setting of the next door listed building. The living conditions and amenity of the neighbouring properties are considered to be not detrimentally harmed, and therefore there is compliance with CD9. As such, officers recommend approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will now call the objectors to speak. That's Mr. Lewis and Mr. Ross. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
I'm speaking on behalf of the family at 43 Chelsea Square, whose views are shared by neighbours. We respectfully urge the committee to refuse this application and investigate concerns further, including a potential member's site visit. The application has been treated as an amendment to their previous 23 permission, resulting in less scrutiny than it warrants. No site visit was carried out, and had one taken place, officers would have seen the genuine impacts raised and neighbours' objections. The 23 permission followed pre-application advice stating that the conversion of both garages and inclusion of garage windows to the mews would not be acceptable. Those elements were not approved in 23, but are now recommended for approval without explanation for the change in position. Our main concern is the introduction of a first floor roof terrace, where there are currently none along the entirety of the mews, which is particularly harmful. It disrupts the uniform roofline that defines this conservation area and introduces intrusive overlooking into neighbouring homes and gardens, including children's bedrooms and a dressing room at 43 Chelsea Square and private gardens behind Old Church Street. Its large privacy screen creates visual clutter but does nothing to preserve amenity. It risks setting a precedent for similar terraces, permanently eroding the quiet, cohesive character of the mews. To clarify, the rear roof terrace was always proposed at first floor level. Officers claim that its impact was reduced by omitting a floor, misunderstands the amended plans, suggesting inadequate scrutiny. The basement also breaches council policy by including in the 50% calculation a parking area outside the garden wall, which forms part of the shared roadway and is subject to third-party rights, not a private garden. In practice, the basement covers more than 60% of the true garden space, setting another uncomfortable precedent. Finally, the garage conversion undermines the service character of the mews. All previous approvals required one garage to be retained and no residential windows. This proposal departs from that pattern.
I represent 66 Old Church Street, and I wish to raise some additional points and urge you to refuse permission to this objection. I requested a planning officer conducted a site visit. However, as far as I'm aware, no site visit was carried out. Number 66 is the only significant Walter Gropius house in the entire country. Any development requires careful consideration of its heritage impact. The 2023 permission was for a simple flat-roofed extension, not for a roof terrace. The new proposal turns that flat roof into a terrace, which overlooks directly into our home, including a teenage bedroom and causing obvious and unacceptable loss of privacy. To address that, the applicant now proposes a 1.8 metre privacy screen, but that simply replaces one harm with another. It blocks daylight and sky views, creates an overbearing sense of enclosure, and imposes unnecessary mass immediately beside a listed building. The house needs room to breathe. This proposal harms both the setting and legibility of a nationally important modernist building. The result conflicts with local policies and the Listed Buildings Act, which require special regard to be given to number 66. The straightforward and balanced solution is to refuse the use of the roof as a terrace, and that would remove the overlooking, avoid the need for the screen, and protect both amenity and heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So can we please now ask the applicant, the agent, Mr. Langhorn? Where are you, Mr. Langhorn?
It's Alfie.
Oh, Alfie,
Yeah.
where are you? Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Okay, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. This application seeks permission for a modest and policy-compliant set of alterations to a single-family dwelling, including a basement extension, a rear and side extension, and the repurposing of existing garages. This is a carefully considered evolution of a previously approved scheme from December 2023. The revised proposal improves the internal layout, enhances the quality of accommodation, and continues to respect the character of the conservation area and the setting of nearby listed buildings. The changes we're proposing are modest but meaningful. The basement layout has been rationalised and has a more efficient internal arrangement. The basement no longer extends beneath the existing garage structure, and it remains well within the 50% coverage threshold and is set away from the listed building, with a stud wall proposed to protect historic fabric. A two-storey side extension was initially explored, but following discussions with officers, we've reverted to the previously approved single-storey form. This ensures the visual separation between the 1950s terrace and the neighbouring listed building is preserved, and the architectural distinction between the two remains clear and legible. The roof terrace on the first floor has also been designed with sensitivity. It's modest in scale, set back and screened. Where it faces number 68, the privacy trellis is proposed. The terrace will not result in overlooking or loss of amenity and is consistent with similar features in the area. We've also proposed converting both garages to living space. These are narrow 1950s structures that are no longer functioning effectively for parking. Two off-street spaces are retained in the front of the existing garages, which officers confirm is sufficient. We consider that the facade changes will result in an improvement to the appearance of Chelsea Square Mews. We appreciate that some residents have raised concerns. We've taken these concerns seriously, and we've responded with design changes, technical clarifications, and mitigation measures. The application before you today is a result of that process, a scheme that is policy compliant, respectful of its context, and supported by officers. It preserves the character of the conservation area and protects the setting of the nearby heritage assets and ensures good living conditions for neighbours. We believe it represents a positive step forward for the site and the local area. We respectfully ask that you support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, committee, we have the opportunity to ask some questions. Who would like to go first? Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really just to delve into this question of the parking area, because from the report there seems to be contradictions, with some believing it belongs to the applicant, whereas I believe the objectors, you seem to suggest it shouldn't form part of the calculation when making the 50%. So my question is to the applicant. Could you just provide some further detail in relation to how that 50% was calculated, and just confirm whether you do or do not own that area which contains the parking space? Thank you.
Yeah, so the hard-standing area is a part of the site red line and is within the applicant's ownership. There were two ways to calculate the 50%. One did the whole site area for the red line, and the other did from the back of the property and the front of the property separately. And all three calculations were below 50% in line with policy CD11.
Thank you. And if I just may ask as a follow-up to the objector, if you wouldn't mind responding to the point that was just made. Thank you.
Hello. It is outside the garden area, and even with the calculation which the applicant has corrected, the front garden is below the 50%, but the inclusion of the area, which are those in their ownership, is outside of the enclosed demise, including the garden and or part of the structure. It is a shared, effectively a shared space, and it's not in their, sole benefit. And our calculations differ to theirs.
Any other questions? Okay, well, shall we move on to questions to the officers? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. It is really just to follow up and gain your view on that point. For the purpose of our basement policy, which view is correct? Should that calculation be made only with land and only with area that is within the sole benefit of the applicant, or actually does the point that was raised by the objector there, does that in relation to our basement policy alter the way in which that 50% calculation is made? Thanks.
Yeah, so the application red line boundary includes the area of hard standing to the rear of the site. For the purposes of CD11 and how officers have applied it in this instance, as that is in the applicant's ownership, they've only served Certificate A, so that is their way of kind of saying that they own that for the purposes of this planning application. We've then interpreted that to comply with CD11 on the grounds that it's an open area of the site, which CD11 does reference to, as well as the garden. So that's how officers have concluded on the 50% in this instance.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on this, because there are obviously two different views, and I think it's important that we really are clear about this. Your red line does go around the car parking spaces, but we have heard that they're in shared ownership. So can you just explain again how you've checked that this actually does belong to the applicant?
Yep, so with the application applicant has to sign a certificate, and that certificate talks about notification of parties or other owners of site, which the application relates to. As the applicants have signed Certificate A, that means that they are, for the purposes of this planning application, kind of saying that they own all of the site and that they haven't had to serve notice on any other interested parties or others with rights into the land. So we've taken that in our assessment to mean that that is within their ownership.
I'm looking at you, Lorna. Can you comment, please?
Well, if they've served a Certificate A, it means that they're the sole owner. That doesn't mean to say there might not be other people that have rights over it, but that is not really a planning matter even. Third-party rights, easements, what have you, aren't really a planning matter. So from our point of view, we look at the certificate to see if they're the sole owner. They are. It's within the red line. So in accordance with the policy, we're entitled to include it as within policy CD11 as part of the open land.
That's very helpful, thank you. So I have a question about the overlooking the terrace. Can you just explain a bit the history of, I know there was an application before, I know that single story was approved. Can you just tell us where we are with the roof terrace and the screen, and the overlooking points that have been raised by the objectors, and how we've considered that?
Yeah, absolutely. So previously there was consent for a single story extension in this area of the site. This application is a fresh application. It's not an amendment to that application. And what has been applied for this time is a roof terrace to extend partial the way across that single story rear extension. Officers have been to site and have looked at the relationship in the context of other buildings in this area. and along with the privacy screen that's been proposed, have concluded that there wouldn't be a harmful sense of overlooking or a sense of enclosure from the privacy screen.
And what would your comment be on the screen itself and the comment from the objector that that does actually lead to a sense of enclosure, and how far away is it from the objector?
So there is a sufficient distance for officers to have concluded that there wouldn't be an overbearing impact from that privacy screen. It's noted as a timber privacy screen. We haven't put a condition on to secure any details of that, but if the committee felt that that would be something that would be useful, you could include that if you wished.
And can you also comment on, I mean, there's a few representations here about the listed building next door and the importance of it. Can you just comment a bit on how that's been considered within, the application and what the impact on that listed building will be?
Yep, so as part of our assessment, we've taken into consideration the setting of that listed building. There's no direct works to the listed building, so it's just the setting. Given the works that are being proposed and how they would be kind of viewed in the context of that listed building, officers have concluded that there wouldn't be any harm to the setting of the listed building as part of this application.
Okay, any other questions, committee? Councillor North.
Thank you. Just on the arboricultural officer's assessment, I noticed that the Council's arboricultural officer was consulted and raised no objections to this, and I noticed that we are conditioned on condition 3 in the report. Can I just have some assurance that nothing will happen on this site unless and until that has been clarified with the additional tree in line with the policy that we've got for that? Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So you're correct, the arboricultural officer has reviewed this application, and whilst he raised no objection, he has required further details to be provided by condition. Condition 3 requires no development to commence until such a scheme of landscaping and the replacement of that tree has been submitted and approved. So there should be sufficient protections in that way.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have one last question, actually, which is the issue of the garage. So we're obviously, and rightly so, concerned about loss of parking spaces. Could you just explain to the committee how you've gone about thinking about the garage, the change of the doors, which has been raised by the objectors, what our policy is about changing garage doors to residential windows? Yeah, just any other comments that would be helpful on the garages and the parking spaces.
Absolutely. So taking first the kind of loss of the parking spaces, the Council's highways officers have reviewed this application and concluded that based on there being 2 existing off-street parking spaces, there wouldn't be an unacceptable pressure put on the off-street parking or on-street parking of the borough as a result of losing the 2 garage spaces. In regard to kind of visual amenity, character and appearance, officers have taken the view that in this instance, given the context and location, the change of the garage doors and the kind of insertion of a window wouldn't be out of keeping with the character and appearance and be so harmful as to warrant the refusal of the application in this instance.
Because it can't be seen? Or what? Why?
So it is within the kind of backland area of the property, so it isn't on the main kind of public views of the site. However, it is in the context of kind of that, how do I put this into words? The fact that it's kind of low level, it's discreet, it's located kind of to the rear of the property, that has reduced kind of the harmful impact of it to a point where it would be not so harmful enough to warrant the refusal of the application in this instance.
Okay, committee, so I don't know if you've got any comments on what you've heard. I mean, there is this issue of the terrace and the screen, whether you feel that that is something that we should impose a condition on, or whether you're happy with the officer recommendation about it being far enough from the objectors that it's not going to be harmful. You're content. I must say I'm also content. I think we can therefore probably move to a decision. So the recommendation is to approve the planning application at 80 Old Church Street. Can those in favour please show? So that is approved. Thank you. We're now going to move on to 44 Victoria Road. So who will be presenting this? Miss Ray, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Saran. First of all, I'd like to draw members' attention to the addendum report, and importantly, there are 2 additional objections that have been received and some further commentary from officers in relation to the report. Planning permission has been sought with this application for a new basement, some demolition works and extensions, a new roof light and various alterations to the front, but the full development description is listed in the report. Turning to the slides, this is an aerial view of the site, showing it in context in relation to its neighbours. The site forms part of the De Vere Conservation Area, and the building is in use as 3 residential flats at the moment. So the report explains in quite some detail at paragraph 6.8 about the significance of the site, and the image here hopefully just helps you put that into context if you don't know it already. I have the existing front elevation drawing here, showing what you've just seen in the photograph, and the proposed front elevation, showing those design elevational changes, which is important as part of the application. And for reference, some imagery of the changes proposed to the front. There's the existing rear elevation versus the proposed. And then we've included a section drawing, existing section, the proposed, and this section which shows the new basement level. There's also further commentary in the addendum report about the rearrangement of units on the site, so I thought it'd be helpful just to explain that on plan. I know the papers do include copies of these in a better view. So as existing at lower ground floor, there is an existing flat. Then at raised ground floor, there is another flat with access to a masonette that sits above. As proposed, there are 2 units at the lower ground floor, flat 2 and flat 3, and the rest of the building, including the new basement level, would accommodate what's called flat 1. There's also lots of reference within our report to a relatively recent appeal scheme, and I thought it would be helpful just to include this slide showing that scheme, very simplistically over 2 drawings. So the appeal scheme was actually for the demolition of the whole building and the reconstruction of a 4-storey building with a basement and a mansard to provide 4 residential units. But I thought this would be a helpful image. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will first start with the objectors. So you have 3 minutes between you. Please start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Last night, the addendum to this planning application was issued. It fundamentally alters and undermines the officer's report, throwing to question the advice before you. This is a positive building, and what is at the heart of these proposals is the harm that they cause to the character and appearance of the conservation area. The planning officer's report stated that no harm exists, although chose not to consult Conservation and Heritage team for a formal response. Over the last 4 years, there have been many planning proposals on this property, all of which were rejected by planning committee, and their appeal dismissed for exactly the reason that harm would occur. The new Conservation and Heritage report from Jane Wiley contradicts the officer's report and reconfirms that this building is of interest in charting the evolution of the area over time and makes a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area. More specifically, it's the facade which contains these quirky features and detail which demonstrates its importance. The proposals look to remove all of this. In doing so, they sweep away all that is of interest in this building, with 50% of the facade being demolished, and harm is caused with no justification. The officer's report failed to evaluate this, but the addendum doesn't. This is a muddle, and it seems to be planning on the hoof. This application should not be before you, as there can be no confidence in the officer's report. The recommendations were ill-informed and premature, and have been shown to be incorrect by Jane Wiley's recent report. As of yesterday, the addendum includes a flimsy list of so-called public benefits which have been hastily produced. These are minor and do not vary in detail from what has been presented before, all of which were dismissed as inconsequential and considered not satisfactory mitigation. The recommendation to grant consent is unproven. It's contradictory and factually incorrect. I respectfully request that this proposal is refused, or at the very least, the matter is deferred until it is clear exactly what you are being presented to determine.
This is an extreme case. It's a direct confrontation with our new local plan. At present, there is a building which is a block of flats consisting of one large maisonette of about 4,000 square feet and two reasonably sized flats, each about 1,500 square feet, suitable for families. The proposal, however, will contain one huge 6,300 square feet flat, which is 60% larger than the previous one, and two minute one-person, one-bedroom flats between 450 and 500 square feet, suitable for no more than a housekeeper or a single family member, effectively an extension of the main flat. Due to their small size, their location embedded in the lower ground floor of this mansion, they would not be viable replacements for the two that would be lost. This proposal is contrary to the new local plan on amalgamation. The large unit, as I said, would be 60% larger and would absorb 2/3 of each of the two medium-sized flats. The housing mix is wrong. It's extreme, one huge flat and two minute units. And finally, this is essentially a loss of housing, a loss of two family-sized flats replaced, in inverted commas, by two minute, unviable flats subservient and ancillary to the mansion. Finally, the certificate of lawful use is not a planning consent. Its status is a material consideration.
Mr. Bulk, you're running over a little bit, so please conclude.
Yeah.
You're running over 3 minutes, unless...
Okay, which I've got one part of that sentence.
Please finish up. And
Thank you very much. Its status is as a material consideration which will change with changes in policy.
Thank you. We'll now move to the agents and the architect, Ms. Rust and Mr. Fisher. Please go ahead whenever you are ready, and you have about 3.5 minutes because they overran slightly.
Thank you. Reference has been made by the third parties about the appeal scheme, which we know was dismissed. That scheme, by others, was completely different to what is being proposed now and before you for consideration. As your officer mentioned, it was for complete demolition of the existing building.
Sorry, 1 second. I think we're having trouble hearing. I can't hear us either, actually.
Okay. I'll shout a bit louder.
Would you like to start again?
Yes,
Thanks.
sorry. My glasses on. Reference has been made by third parties about the appeal scheme, which we know was dismissed. That scheme, by others, was completely different to what is being proposed now and before you for consideration. As your officer mentioned when presenting it, it was for a complete demolition of an existing building and construction of a new building that would be much larger in height, scale and bulk. This proposal is not dissimilar to so many development proposals you have seen over the years and continue to see. It is for the extension and alteration of an existing unlisted building within a conservation area. There is no significant demolition of the original building, and the same number of units remain. It is not a redevelopment scheme, nor an amalgamation of units. The inspector refused the appeal scheme on the grounds that the new, much larger building would unbalance the relationship with number 42, and therefore the ability to read the proposed building as a villa pair would be demolished, concluding that the proposal would fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. He did not dismiss the appeal because of the quirky nature of the existing building, but rather what he did say was that the property has been significantly extended and altered, resulting in the building having, and I quote, a rather quirky appearance. In contrast, this proposal seeks to improve the appearance of the existing building to respond more closely with number 42, thereby restoring the original villa pair, which in turn will at the very least preserve the conservation area and arguably enhance it. We believe the proposals do not result in any harm, but moreover will enhance the conservation area, and therefore public benefits do not need to be demonstrated. That said, if it is considered the proposals result in some level of harm, that limited harm is outweighed by the positive benefits, which include removal of a large side extension, which is a later addition, improving the roof form, reinstating timber-framed windows and other detailing consistent with the neoclassical style prevalent in the local area, and by providing a far more energy-efficient building with a wholesale refurbishment and upgrade of all services. Significant new planting is also proposed, which will enhance the visual amenity of the area. I would like to clarify that there is no loss of residential units. As your officer's report advises in paragraph 4.4, whilst the existing 3 units will be reconfigured, this does not amount to development requiring planning permission, and this has been confirmed in a lawful development certificate issued by the Council in 2022. Your officer's report concludes that the proposals do comply with local plan policies, and we trust you will therefore agree with your officer's recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, committee, we have questions to the applicant and the objector. Who would like to go first? Councillor Lane.
I'm very happy to go first, thank you. And thanks to both the objectors and the applicants being here. First question for the objectors, just in relation to the number of units and specifically the 2 smaller apartments. I believe reading in the pack there are sort of 39 square metres and they're 1-bedroom apartments. Now, although clearly they're smaller than the apartments there now, is it not fair to say that for a young worker or student or someone living on their own, they're perfectly fine apartments to live in, and many people in this part of London do live in 1-bedroom apartments of those size. Would that be a fair point to make, do you think?
I think one of the problems is that it will be used probably to look after the building when the owners are not there. So it's likely to be for a housekeeper. Sorry, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm sure they can answer what the use might be. So, but it is the size of it, which is very small, and it's just above the limit for a 1-bedroom, 1-person flat. So it's not a substitute for the flats that have been lost, or would be lost rather, because they're still there, which are 3 times the size. In other words, it's a different, it's not comparable. So yes, there are 2 units, but they're only 1/3 of the size of taken together with the 2 that are being lost.
Sorry, can I pick up on that as well? You're absolutely right. I mean, ordinarily a 1-bedroom flat would be relevant. In this instance, these are tucked away, as Michael says, in the bowels of the building. They're not accessed from the principal access of the building. You've got to go across a car parking space that they do not have rights to. You've got to go around a convoluted access down to the lower ground floor, across a glass panel which goes down into the private swimming pool of the house that is the majority unit, and then into a side access. I don't know how the market would view these, but I consider them unviable in that instance. I don't even know how the postman or Amazon deliveries would know where they were.
Councillor Lane. Go.
Thank you, Chairman. And then if the applicant would like to respond to those points made, I'm thinking particularly on whether any third parties could access those two flats. We've heard about how they would have to walk across car parking space that they wouldn't own. Could you explain from your perspective if those two smaller flats would be viable in the future for any third party buyer? Thanks.
Thank you. Mike Fisher, Studio Indigo Architects. The minimum size for a one-person flat in London is 37 square metres. Our two flats are 42.7 metres and 47.6 metres, respectively. They're accessed from 2 points, from indeed the car parking area, but they're also accessed through the main front entrance gate. You come in through the gate, you turn left, you come across the front garden, and you go past the bike store into a set of stairs that leads you to a separate entrance for both of those flats. At the moment, the two flats are proposed to be used by the owner's sons, one of whom is paralysed, and you will notice on the plans that we've got turning circles for wheelchairs. That's the purpose of the flats at the moment, but they could equally be used and sold or separately or used separately. I think a housekeeper, whether it's for this house or any other house, also has a right to live in central London.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Bark, two questions actually. The first is about the certificate, and can you just, because I interrupted you, could you just explain again your point about the certificate that the property has from the council? And the second question was about the design, and you didn't comment on that in your speech, but I just wondered what your view was on the design issues, please.
Well, I should say on design issues, I've left that entirely to Will Martin. With regard to the certificate, I think I'd like to read the notice that was on the decision notice for the certificate. It says the effect of the certificate is also qualified by the proviso in section 192 in brackets 4 of the 1990 Act as amended, which states that the lawfulness of the described use or operation is only conclusively presumed where there has been no material change before the use is instituted or operations begun in any of the matters relevant to determining such lawfulness. In other words, that policy has changed since then, and how the policy would regard the particular, you can see the difference between flats that are 140 square metres and ones that are 40. In other words, they are 2/3 smaller in both instances, whereas the large units is actually 60% larger than the current one.
So is your concern about the size or the access? Sounds like it's the size.
Sorry, I'm leaving the access stuff.
Okay, so...
but I don't dissent at all from what was said.
Fine.
No,
so
it's largely, they're not comparable with what's there at the moment. And what was said in the certificate has limitations with a significant change in policy. In other words, once the policy changed, you couldn't operate it in the same way. It's not a planning consent anyway. It's a material consideration.
And perhaps you could comment on the design.
Yes, of course. Obviously, the design looks to mimic an Italianate villa, an imaginary Italianate villa, because no one knows what that originally looked like. The applicant himself confirms that. The heritage officer, Jane Wiley, actually clarifies this. And I'll just read from what she said. Whilst the proposed modifications seek to reinstate an Italian style of the neighbourhood properties, the design does not attempt to reinstate what would have originally been there. and therefore the proposals are somewhat of a pastiche, because they haven't demonstrated what they knew that was. The building's been so extended in the past. But it should be noted that the current modern architecture was installed by a family who were the founders of Derry and Toms in 1909, between 1909 and 1946, when they lived in the building. And they employed architectural styles very similar that currently exist on Barker's. So all of that will be swept away in favour of an imaginary, which is supposedly something that it would have looked like. It should also be mentioned that the conservation area is specific on its mix of an eclectic nature of architectural styles. It isn't like Eaton Square, it's not a Georgian terrace, it's not stucco, it's all sorts of different things. And this building, as it stands today, typifies everything that's interesting in that conservation area.
Thank you. And to the agent, just on this question of design, and obviously we have to consider what's in front of us, but I am curious about, given the feedback that you've had from the inspector and our heritage officer about why you've chosen to go with this design. Could you talk to the committee a bit about that, please?
Yes, of course I can. I think the key phrase probably there was the building was so extended in the past and it's changing again in the future. Things aren't fossilized at one point in time. For everyone who will say it's an attractive building, there are equally the same amount of people who say that it's an unattractive building. And to our client, it's an unattractive building. And he would like to see it revert back to what it was. Yes, we don't know exactly what it was, but from the description, we know that it was a pair of villas, and therefore it's almost certain that they had strong similarities. They weren't necessarily symmetrical. From the plan, we don't think they were, but we've made a pretty good guess at perhaps at what they would have looked like. And the building is still that same Victorian building on the back of the house as well. So what we're doing is really unifying the front and the back in a way that it would have originally been designed. It's called pastiche. I don't think pastiche is a bad word, and pastiche happens throughout the borough and also in this area.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to officers? Okay, so we'll move on to officer questions. Well, I think I'll start. I mean, the two kind of big areas, I think, of discussion here are around the three flats and how the layout has changed from the certificate and what's existing. And then there is the whole discussion about the design and some of the evidence that we've gathered on that. So starting on the layout of the three flats, Mr. Bark talked about the certificate. Could you please explain to the committee exactly how we should be thinking about the certificate and about our amalgamation policy, how things have changed since that certificate's been given, and any other thoughts which will be helpful to us when we're reaching a conclusion about this?
Yes, thank you. So the certificate takes us sort of away from policy and back to the section of the Act that talks about what is development, what is a change of use. Here you have 3 flats within the building, and proposed you have 3 flats within the building. So officers have concluded that there's no material change of use as a result. And you've heard very eloquently why the objectors disagree. The certificate at that point in time was similar to this scheme, not the same, but similar, in the building's footprint was being changed up, reconfigured to provide 3 flats with 2 at that lower ground floor level that are much smaller. And we've confirmed when assessing that application that wouldn't amount to a material change of use and doesn't require planning permission because it's effectively not development. There's no material change. So we've given that quite considerable weight in our assessment. So we've said that certificate, even at that point in time, it would still apply now if they reapplied. We think we would still grant that certificate. We give it considerable weight. How much weight you attribute is up to you in your planning judgment as the decision maker. And it's I wouldn't say it's so relevant, the policy change. What you want to think about is is this a fallback position that will definitely happen? Is this something that you want to give a lot of weight to? And do you think the resultant development is material? So that will be your consideration in the round. And it's our view that there is no change of use here.
So I guess the whole spirit of the policy and everything that we talk about with amalgamation is about providing this mix of housing and to make sure that we're preserving enough housing for everyone. And I do take Councillor Lane's point that, you know, we need to have different types of housing for different types of people. But it is concerning about the access and how viable these flats really are as standalone. What's your view on that? Because they are, you have to walk, well, one of them overlooks the garden. I mean, it doesn't feel like they're very standalone. So I guess I'm just asking, are they really within the spirit of our amalgamations policy and, you know, our housing policy?
I'd just caution you against kind of trying to apply the policy, because unless you think that planning permission is required. That's the trigger. So if you think planning permission is required and you believe that this is a material change of use, then that can come into play, and you can say, well, I'm concerned because they are smaller, they don't make the same contribution, the access is contrived.
Well, it is a material change from what was originally given, isn't it? I mean, in terms of the certificate.
It's different to the certificate, yes, but what we're considering is the existing building and current layout, the proposed building and the current layout, and whether there is a change of use. And for us, we've said no, because 3 flats remain 3 usable flats. But that's the conclusion we've reached. And it's then, if you concluded, actually, that does require planning permission, then you'd be thinking about those policies, and you'd be concerned about the creation of what we in our policy call super prime units, which undoubtedly the resultant building would be. And if officers believe they had control over it, we may be pushing for better optimisation, a greater number of units on the site. Housing is a key policy, and something we have 2 other items on the agenda that engage that policy. It's really important, but for us, we don't think we have control.
Okay, so moving on to the design aspects. So, I mean, we have had feedback from the inspector about the design. We have had feedback from our own heritage and conservation officer, which feels like it hasn't been considered within your report. So I guess, why didn't you speak to the heritage officer before writing your own report?
That is a good question. They're not a statutory consultee, so we don't consult them on every application in a conservation area. The original scheme, the appeal scheme, absolutely needed them to be consulted on because there was whole-scale demolition. So they were a key contributor at the hearing when we refused the application and so on. With the next application that came in that's very similar to this, given the history, given how much had changed since 2022 when that was considered, we consulted them again. And if you compare the 2 observations, they are very similar. So when taking receipt of this application, we as officers felt we had enough information to assess it based on the inspectors, the recent comments from them, and the policies that we chose to engage. But, sorry.
I mean, I just think it's interesting that our conservation officer is not that happy with the design.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the previous concerns they raised, and it was the objectors that asked us to do that, and we saw no harm in getting that, an up-to-date observation on that and providing it to you, because it is a critical issue.
And they're not happy with it?
They've said concerns raised, they haven't outright objected, but yes, we've provided for them in detail.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just really to follow up on the first point around the 3 usable, you said 3 usable flats remain. Just want to understand in relation to the access of the 2 smaller flats, can they be accessed by third parties, say if they were sold, without, say, encroaching on the land of the larger dwelling? Because I think what I'm finding difficult is if they can't be accessed that way, can they still be viable flats when you say there's still 3 viable flats there, say, if they were sold 5 years down the line and someone who was of a completely different family lived in one of those flats. Could you just drill down that bit further? Thanks.
Absolutely. So they'd both be accessed from the front light well. So the entrance would be communal to a degree. They wouldn't enter with the main property. They'd go down into the light well, and then there's 2 entrance doors. So that is possible that you can. The garden at the back can only be accessed by flat 3 and then the larger flat 1 house. So they would share a garden effectively. It would be a communal garden in that sense. So there's, for us as officers, nothing restricting access. They can freely get to and from those units from the front of the property down in the light well. So that's why we think they can remain independent.
Sorry, just a brief follow-up. This is in relation to the garden now. A communal garden where where there's only 2 properties and one is so significantly larger than the other, is that something we see in practice anywhere else in the borough? When I think of a communal garden, I often think of, say, 5 or 6 flats of the same sort of size. Does that not change the nature of those 3 dwellings?
It's something we've concluded isn't a material change of use. I think that's the key. So it may not be desirable for that home to have another person using their space and vice versa, but there's nothing of concern with that layout and arrangement, and we see it in other parts of the borough where we've got flat conversions that share gardens. It's just there will be a very big difference in the size of the homes.
Any other questions? Councillor North.
Just really about the documentation and the paperwork that's submitted in this case. Are we content that it was submitted correctly and fully and in good time?
Thank you. Yes, we are. I think the criticism has come from our consultation late with Design and Heritage from objectors who would have preferred for it to be done earlier on in the process. But there's no concern from my part that that's not procedurally correct because it's not a statutory consultee. We have sought it to make sure you had all the information in front of you and objectors were satisfied that they'd been involved, published it, provided it and addressed it in the report. So we aren't concerned about that, but it's how much weight you give the design officer's comments as you are the decision maker.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, so I think we start moving towards a decision on this. I think it's clear that there's 2 kind of very material considerations here. One is about the layout of the flats, given what's there currently, given the certificate, and the other is around the design. I mean, I have to say on the design, I can see that it's a personal choice whether people like it or don't like it, but I do kind of feel that we should defer to the experts, who in this case are the Heritage and Conservation Officer and to some degree the Inspector, who've both said that they feel that the design does contribute to the conservation area. So I feel a bit uncomfortable about just sweeping away their conclusions on that. On the layout of the flats, I really am concerned about the garden. The access, I can see there is access, although you have to come over the front part of the house. But at the back of the house, one of the flats overlooks the garden. It just doesn't feel that it's very standalone. So I really do feel concerned about the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here with, the mixed accommodation that you talked about, Councillor Lane. But yeah, I mean, any comments or thoughts? Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think on design, I would agree. I think it's not necessarily always the case in conservation areas that the best course of approach when trying to enhance it is to revert to what the building was like or may have been like at the very start. I think we do need to take the whole history and context of the building in the round. So I think in that context, I would probably tend to agree with the design officer's comments.
Any other comments?
In relation to the design, I think you're right, Chair. I think it depends, and some people may prefer an Italianate design that is more similar to number 42, and others will prefer the quirky features of the existing design. So I think on that point, the objections are not strong enough. But I think where I do have more of a concern is the viability of the two small apartments. With the communal garden being between what is in essence a sort of very large dwelling, a house, and just one other one-bedroom apartment, and combined with the access requirements of those two one-bedroom apartments, I would say more of a concern about that latter point than the point on design. I personally don't mind the proposed design. I think my concerns are more in relation to the viability of those two apartments, and if they're not viable, whether then that means that we are more minded not to approve. So I think it's very finely balanced on that latter point. So yeah, I'm keen to hear what other colleagues have to say as well.
Any other comments? Councillor North.
Yes, I feel for the officers on this one, because this is obviously an unbalanced decision, because there is a lot of pros and a lot against, and I think the objectors have made a very compelling point on the issue of the design and the conservation area, which is important with this case. It is not like we've got a post-war ugly building that's been added on. This is something that has evolved over time, and in and of its own has its own architectural merit, and it's certainly a building with history and merit in a conservation area where there is different buildings. But actually bigger issue than that is, as Councillor Lane has said, my concern is over the layout, because people of this borough in the future will look back at this planning decision and they will say to us, you've clearly allowed 3 reasonable sized dwelling units to be made into a large mansion with the staff living in, or in this case, a staff and a family member, which is really not in the spirit of what we're trying to do and what is pressured upon us as a borough from central government at the moment to maintain and enhance the number of properties that we have, real properties. So it seems to me like a way of getting round the planning policy on this. So it is finely balanced, I have to say, but at the moment I'm on the edge to say I don't grant.
Thank you, Councillor North. Very finely balanced, as you say, but it feels like we're... You're looking at me. Okay, it feels like we're close to being able to make a decision. Do we feel ready to take a vote? Okay, so the recommendation from... sorry.
I did just want to point out that the addendum report, obviously the recommendation from the officers is the same, but instead of saying that there was no harm, it's now less than substantial harm, but outweighed by the public benefits. So it's whether you agree with the officers that the public benefits outweigh the harm, or they don't. So I think that is where we are on the design issue. And on the units issue, it's whether you give the certificate of lawfulness the same weight that the officers have.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you, Ms. Bowery. I think what we're sort of being asked to do here is think about the less than substantial harm and whether that's outweighed by some of the other benefits that the scheme offers, which is, you know, the side extension and the improvements to the building. I have to say, it doesn't do it for me. I think there is harm, and I'm not sure it is outweighed by the other benefits, but I think that's a really important point. So I think we're ready to move towards a decision. The recommendation from officers is to approve the application at 44 Victoria Road. Can those in favour please show? And those against? So planning permission is refused. So now I think it's important that we're very clear on the reasons, and perhaps you can help us with this, Ms. Rowe. I mean, you've heard the discussion that's taken place around the, and it's very tricky. I mean, it is very, I can see everybody is really, you know, thought carefully as we've reached these conclusions. On the design, given what you've heard, And Councillor Doran, you're the one who was not completely convinced about the design questions. Would you be in favour of it being a reason for refusal or
Yes,
not?
I mean, in my view, it'd be interesting to discuss this with colleagues. I think that is from my point of view, would be the main reason. I think in terms of the capacity of the flats, if you believe it's effectively amalgamation by other means, my view on that would be, well, there's another case to say, well, larger properties are not necessarily an issue, we need those as well. If actually you believe it's not an amalgamation and it's a provision of smaller units, well, those are needed as well. So from my perspective, it's really around the design as being the primary issue.
So, I'm sorry, actually, it was Councillor Lane who said you weren't too concerned about the design. Would you be in favour of that being a reason for refusal or not?
I honestly am more concerned about potential infringement of the amalgamation policy. Less concerned about the design. Personally, I think the design, like I said, it's 50-50. Some would prefer it. Some would prefer the original quirky design. So what I would say is I don't have a strong view on that as a reason for refusal. I think it could go either way. I think it's a 50-50.
So should we put together two possible reasons and then vote on them, Ms. Barry? How should we?
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Shall I suggest the two reasons, and then that probably will narrow the discussion a bit. So just scribbling down what the final wording. It would be great if you could delegate to officers, but I would say something like the proposed development by reason of its proposed demolition, elevational changes and redesign would result in less than substantial harm and not outweighed by public benefits with the policies and so on. The second reason, you're concluding there is a change of use. So the proposal involves an internal reconfiguration, which would, by the layout and design, because that would cover garden areas, access and so on, result in a material change of use, and the resultant dwellings on site would fail to contribute to the borough's housing stock as independent dwellings, and concerns around them being substandard as a result. But we can, if you're happy to delegate that final wording, those would be the reasons.
I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so should we vote on those reasons, given that they're
vote
slightly
on
different
both
views?
reasons, and if if it's not approved, those two reasons, I mean, then we'd go to a different.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't had anyone propose yet.
Okay, so someone needs to propose. So Councillor Dorian would like to propose, and who would like to second? Councillor North? So the proposal is to refuse the planning permission for the two reasons given by Ms Ray. Can those in favour of the proposal please show? So that's unanimous for the two reasons. Thank you very much. So planning permission is refused at 44 Victoria Road for the two reasons that we've discussed. So we will now move on to, it says Palace Green, but of course it's not Palace Green. It is Palace Gardens Terrace. 1 Palace Gardens Terrace. So who will be presenting that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Siren.
Thank you, Ms Ray.
So firstly, I'd like to draw members' attention to the addendum report for this application as well. And the application before you is for a single-storey basement extension, and again, the full development description is in the report pack. There's an aerial view on there and some site photographs. The existing ground floor plan, I'll actually scoot through these plans because the most important consideration here is that basement level. So here is the proposed section drawing showing the basement level underneath the house as described by the officer report. And there are also some changes at the back in relation to that rear addition. Officers are recommending approval for this application, and at the appropriate time, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, if we could turn to the objector, Mr. Starr. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. As a matter of principle, I, like many others, object to any expansion of a building in the borough, both below and above the ground, that reduces green space. That, I'm afraid, is a statement rather than, because I know that is entirely a matter for the council, so I'm not going to object to anything in that regard. Turning specifically to One Palace Gardens Terrace, the major concern of both my wife and myself is a matter of privacy invasion. We have spoken to the owner's representative, who is here today, at a meeting that I called in our garden and apartment at 6A Inverness Gardens to demonstrate how we would be impacted. They saw the privacy issue and made some helpful modifications by moving a staircase and agreeing to replace hedging and ensuring that the occupants of One Palace Gardens Terrace can't see directly into either our master bedroom, our master bathroom, our other bedroom, or indeed the garden. This is our biggest concern. What I'm not worried just about for ourselves, but it's going forward. And therefore, I'm asking something slightly different. I'm asking that I'm not going to object to the development, but I am asking that it's formally noted that of our privacy concerns, because they are very significant. The decision, I believe, was taken by the officer without even coming to see us, and it's looking straight down and into our windows. I just want to make sure that we are protected from a privacy point of view now and going forward, and that is mentioned in the approval process, which you are obviously going to recommend.
Thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Short one.
Well, I'm sure we'll have questions. Okay, so can we move to the agent, please? Mr. Alfie Yateman.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, good evening. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak briefly in support of the proposal and your officer's clear recommendation to grant planning permission. As it's a relatively straightforward case, I'll just focus very briefly on the two key points that have been raised, namely the garden coverage and privacy. So firstly, on the extent of basement coverage beneath the rear garden, as you'll be aware, the borough has a long-established policy that expects new basements not to exceed a maximum of 50% of each garden or open part of the site. In this case, the proposed basement is modest in that regard. It extends no further to the rear than the existing upper ground floor rear terrace. And given the enclosed nature of this area, we don't believe it can be reasonably described as being an open part of the site. In practical terms, it therefore represents a 0% intrusion into the open area. But even if this terrace was ignored, it represents only a 16% intrusion. We also would like to note that, importantly, the proposal involves the increase of green space. That's achieved through the removal of 2 outbuildings and associated hard surfacing, which is put down to grass as shown in the proposed site plan. Just turning quickly to privacy, Mr. Salmon's obviously mentioned his previous concerns, which we met with him about and looked to address through revisions to the proposal. In the end, we moved the upper ground floor rear terrace back from the boundary. We removed or reduced the extension back from the boundary as well, so set back the lower ground floor rear extension. And we've also incorporated a planter and trellis on the rear terrace. So in our view, you perhaps would have seen from the photographs, but that trellis and planter doesn't exist at the moment from the rear terrace. So in our view, that represents an improvement on the conditions of privacy, and that was shared by your officers in making their opinion and their recommendation. I'm not sure whether they attended, well, Inverness Gardens, but I do know that they attended the site and saw it from the perspective of the application site itself. So I'd just like to conclude that you know, the proposal before you provides an opportunity for the applicant to enhance the quality and quantity of her residential accommodation. All subjective issues surrounding design appearance have been agreed, and the application adheres to all policy requirements within the statutory development plan. We therefore respectfully invite members to accept your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question to the objector. Maybe I misheard, so please do tell me if I'm wrong, but did I hear you saying that in fact you are now not objecting to this, but you merely wish to register your concerns? Was that correct, or do you still object? Do you still not want this?
No, not at all. I actually did not object when it came through the system, other than to make this comment. My concern is, you know, you can put up a temporary screen, you can grow a plant. The next person who comes along to own the properties doesn't like the screen, takes it down, cuts the trees down, cuts the bushes down, and I just want to make sure that, and I will accept the planning completely, but I do want to make sure that there is a permanent note that privacy is a significant issue to us, and we're comfortable as it is at the moment, and we just hope that that is.
Can I just follow up on that? With the privacy issues that you're talking about, are you talking about the terrace at the back and the overlooking into your garden, or is there another issue around privacy? What is it specifically?
It's not really looking into our garden that worries us. We got these huge, wonderful sash windows at the back of our house, which look right down the length of the gardens, of the whole of Brunswick Gardens behind. Anybody who comes out and stands on that terrace, where it is, can turn around and look straight in on us. At the moment, they can't see it because they've got a large hornbeam hedge in between, and we've got birch trees. That's fine in the summer. In the winter, it's not great. But what I don't want is somebody to put a planter in, make it look nice, or get planning permission, and suddenly the plants in the planter die and nobody replaces them, and then there's nothing else for us to come back on and say, look, we can't, we've lost our privacy completely.
So it's about the terrace at the back?
It's about the terrace, yeah, it is. It's about being able to look over the wall into which is about 6 foot tall wall, and look straight in onto whatever we're up to. I pity them, but for us it's not. It's a worry, and for maybe for people who follow on from us in the house, which is our primary residence.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's good to hear that there have been some changes. It sounds like that's worked quite well. Are you happy with those changes, or
I'm happy
not
with?
Happy,
I'm absolutely happy with the changes that he has proposed. We had a sensible meeting. He came, looked, and actually saw it from our perspective. Unlike your case officer, who did not come and look at it from our perspective, he noticed the issues, made sensible suggestions, which I find acceptable. But what I'm worried about is once it's built, does it disappear? And then we're stuck. The architects have gone, the designers have gone, and somebody else buys the property and they don't like it, so they take it down and want to look at us in the bath.
Okay, well, I'm sure we can ask if there's anything that can be done with that. Are there any? Councillor North.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon. I'm very interested in what you said, and actually I was attending the Cherry Trees Residents Association recently and was lobbied very heavily on this case, so I know it is something of concern. Actually, the concerns you haven't raised this evening have been raised by other people, and they are in the pack, is about the disturbance that's going to be caused, and it is a considerable issue, so I just want to let the applicant know that there is a considerable concern over the actual build process, and I'll be asking the officers to see if there's any conditions or or advisories that we can do to further enhance that. But I will ask the officers, as Councillor just said, about exactly what you raised about their... But I will ask the applicant, is there any further steps you can take and to confirm with us here, at least verbally, if not by condition, that you will enhance the planting and the screening that would help your neighbour? Because I think it's a very, very fair and reasonable point he makes.
Yes, well, in fact, I have discussed that with the applicant. She's very happy. You'll appreciate from her perspective, intervisibility goes both ways. So she's keen on privacy as well, and she is very happy with the trellis proposal that we have proposed and associated planters. So the intention very much is to retain that for the duration. I'm sure, you know, if members and officers were minded to do so, we'd be happy for a condition to ensure that that stays in place for the duration. I'd just like to raise as well, just with that in mind, I was just flicking through officers' reports whilst this discussion was being had, but condition 5 specifically suggests that no trellises shall be installed on the roof terrace at any time. Perhaps it'd be sensible just to amend that to say no trellises other than that shown in the proposed drawing, just to clarify that the trellis that is shown is acceptable.
Yes, thank you very much. I will ask the officers on that, and I've made a note on condition 5 on that one, so yes, thank you. I'll follow up on that.
Good. So let's move on to questions for officers. Councillor North, would you like to start?
Thank you. Yes, so just to follow up on the question, the point raised by the objector, which sounds fair and reasonable, and the kind offer from the applicant, or the representative of the applicant there, can we further condition this that will settle that point for the screening? And I do note it says, condition 5, it's got items no higher than 1,100 millimetres. So can we maybe adapt the wording of that can accommodate the points made?
Yes, thank you. I would actually recommend that we edit that condition. So edit condition 5, so it's no longer no tall items. It would be roof terrace and then trellis to be installed. And then within that condition, make sure it's installed and maintained thereafter, because then that makes it enforceable if it's taken away or removed at any time. Our enforcement team can go and investigate that. So that's what I would actually almost delete and rewrite that condition to secure that in perpetuity. And then to make sure that that is watertight, just update condition 2 to stay notwithstanding condition 5, so that we don't then make them accord with the approved plans and there be any problem there. So that's my recommendation to you, and then hopefully that deals with the privacy issue.
Thank you. I'm happy to propose that as an added condition or an amended condition. And what I would say to both parties is your ward councillors will be keeping an eye on this one. So if there is any problems with enforcement, please go to the enforcement officers and your local ward councillors, that we will remember this case.
Thank you. So it sounds like we're able to move to a decision on this. I mean, obviously nobody likes the disruption that this kind of development leads to, and we've all lived through it in the borough, but it is permitted. So I hope we can help a little bit in you know, allaying some of your concerns, and I'm assuming, Ms. Ray, that everything that we normally do in terms of really robust conditions to protect the neighbours and some of these other concerns around you know, the construction periods and all of that is in place and you're comfortable with it?
Yes, absolutely. As far as we can under the Planning Act, I mean, it is disruptive to have these basement works go, but we have the Construction Traffic Management Plan. Our Code of Construction Practice condition has been added, and the team will work independently to manage that as far as we can.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to approve the planning application at 1 Palace Gardens Terrace. Can those in favour please show? With the amended condition. Those in favour? Okay, so that is approved. Thank you. Is everyone happy to move straight on? Yes. Great. So we will now move to Hedgegate Court. Powis Terrace, you again.
Thank you. So this application at Hedgegate Court is for largely for replacement windows. So the details are within your pack. I'll just run through the slides. Here is a site location plan sat adjacent to an aerial image to show you whereabouts that is in relation to Westbourne Park Road. These are the existing and proposed elevations, highlighting the windows that are to be changed. The report talks about the internal light wells, which can't be seen in these elevation drawings, but can be seen within this one, so showing those proposed light wells internally. So all the windows in the light wells are proposed to be changed from timber to aluminium, except for that one at number 2, which is visible from the public realm. Officers are recommending approval for the replacement windows, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a speaker for this case, an objector, Mr. Irvin. Where are you? Hi, welcome. Thank you for bearing with us. And please, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready. Thank you very much.
Right, apologies. Due to me having a medical incident today and had to go to hospital for a wee while, I wasn't able to complete or write out a proper survey of what I wanted to say, so I'm going to have to do it off the top of my head. So I'll meet with the people that I'm sort of representing or speaking for, who are the people, the residents of Hedgegate Court, or a number of them. The light well windows is the first instance, being changed from existing timber single glazed to aluminium black coated double glazing. Now, for all the people who are living and overlooking in the buildings, who look into the light wells, because there's some of the flats surround them and some are straight back into them. This is not going to be very conducive or very nice to look at, and loses some of the character of the building as it already stands. I know they're not visible from the street, and that's probably where your planning committee and the conservation area is protected, but it's not protected from the residents. The other major issue was, which I've just really spotted, and it's not that clear, although we thought it was at first, is the colour of the windows. Yes, they are going to be black externally. The internal surfaces, which in the existing windows are white, would be, I think, because it's not, I presume that the wooden ones and the external surfaces, the ones on view and the ones part of the conservation change, would be white on the inside, but now I can't see that actually specified, and I think we all assumed that. But the aluminium ones are certainly not. So there's quite a lot of disquiet amongst the people living there. When they're used to having white internal surfaces in their windows, now going to have black ones. This type of, I know this internal, if you think that if the committee thinks that the windows are going to be that the aluminium windows are going to be acceptable because they're not appearance to the general public, then it becomes something about the whether the proposal would continue to ensure good living conditions for the people that live there, really. And if we're going to have to have black internal windows, internal surfaces to windows, most people don't want that. And although it is possible to paint this material, it's not ideal, it's quite a tricky job, it's specialised paints. Many of the people are disabled or elderly, as indeed I am myself, and I've got lower eyesight. Masking up and cutting into window frames, it's not going to be very easy for lots of them if that's to be done. And certainly in our tenancy agreements, it's quite clear that is the tenant's responsibility, not the landlord's. And I'm not sure if there's a representative of the landlord here today, Peabody Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Irvine. I'm sure there might be some questions, but thank you very much. Your right, 3 minutes is up, so if you don't mind, I'll stop you there.
That's fine.
Moving directly to questions, Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the one question, and thanks for being here tonight, even though you did have a medical issue earlier. I hope you're okay. My question is simply, is your objection solely to the painting of the windows becoming black rather than white? And if we were able to condition a change, we may not be able to, but if we were able to condition a change that they should be painted white, would you be content? Is that your main objection? Thank you.
Yes, I think that is the main objection, although many people do not, would prefer to have timber windows within the light wells rather than the aluminium ones proposed.
Well, I think we'll ask the officer. Can you talk to us about the change of colour? Actually, there's many of these windows, from timber white to black aluminium. What's our position on that?
So the black aluminium is within the internal light wells, so not externally in public views. And I think a lot of the concerns are the finish internally as you are standing inside the building would potentially have a black finish on the inside. We haven't received confirmation to say, that's absolute, there's no possibility of changing it and so on. But equally, that in itself, the internal finish wouldn't require planning permission. Otherwise, based on the objections, we may well have recommended a condition to you anyway to say the finish should be white. But it's challenging because that internal face, the colour and finish, likely doesn't require planning permission.
But I think I'm sort of asking about the timber white to black aluminium, and I mean, is that something that we allow? We don't think it's important. We don't think it's a big change. It's just there's a lot of windows here. I think the point Mr. Irvine's making is that there's a lot of people who are going to see these windows because of the size of the block.
So that the only windows that would be black and aluminium are the ones in the internal light wells. So on the drawings, all the other windows on the main front elevation, main rear elevation, and the kind of half light well that fronts the street on almost the side elevation of the building, they would all be like-for-like replacements, so would remain timber and the same finish. It's the ones inside the building. So as you look at, maybe the site location plan would, that's the third page in your pack. Actually, that doesn't help you. I'll bring it up on the screen and I'll just show you what I mean. So if this site location plan, the one on the left, you can see there's these internal light wells here between each of the properties, and it's the ones enclosed within there that will be black aluminium. And I completely understand the objector's point that when you're inside your building using that space and seeing that space, it would be the preference would be for a different finish. But unfortunately, from our point of view, we don't think we have control over that. The only thing I could suggest is an informative that we could include on the decision notice to make it very clear that that would be welcome and something that has been requested by objectors.
I think that would be helpful, and it is Peabody, who we have a relationship with, I would like somebody to call them and tell them about these concerns. I really appreciate they're not planning issues, but, you know, we have relationships with Peabody. I think we can call them.
We can take that as an informative and an action.
Please, for the housing team to do that.
Yeah, I mean, even as the planning team, I can report back and debrief on this meeting, me personally, and say, this was discussed, these were the concerns raised, and we'd like you to consider it. Unfortunately, we can't secure it
I understand.
as the planning authority, but we can definitely relay the information. There's nothing stopping us doing that.
Okay. So I think as an informative, I think that will help, Mr. Irvin. At least it will keep the conversation going about your concerns. Yeah,
Yes.
we can't really invite you to speak again, but I think what we can do is just take the conversation at least offline, so you'll have an opportunity to speak with the landlord and raise these concerns with them. It's tricky because it's not really something that in planning we can control, right?
I'll follow up the call personally with an email and make sure it's on the application files, so that my contact details there if anyone wants to speak again from a planning point of view.
Thank you. I think that would
All
be
right,
really
thanks,
helpful.
thanks very much for
No,
that.
well, thank you for
Right.
coming. And
well,
these
thank the
things-
officers also for picking up on the half light well at the end of the building at number 2,
Thank
which
you.
I raised on writing
Thank
as part
you.
of my objection, but that's been picked up on, so
They-
thank you for that.
They will.
Right.
And, you know, I think it's really great that you've come here to raise these concerns. So we'll move to Councillor North. You've got something to add?
I was just going to add, actually, to pay compliment to the officers, because I noticed that they wrote to 170 residents on this issue, so there was quite a good consultation on this, and we only had 3 objections and 3 additional comments. But I'm glad that we were able to accommodate that point. Thank you.
I think it's a good conversation to continue. So we'll move to a decision then. So the recommendation is to approve the planning permission at Hedgegate Court, even. Can those in favour please... Sorry. With the informative. So can those in favour please show? Thank you very much. So that is approved. And good luck. Please do be in touch if we can help.
Yes, thank you very much again.
Okay. 20A Pembroke Square. So I'm going to step out for this one, if everyone is happy to continue. Yep. Councillor North is going to chair this item.
Thank you. So the next case is the case of 20A Pembroke Square, and we have speakers for this one. For the objectors, we have Mr. Bolton, Mr. Honour and Mr. Lynch. Thank you. Please go ahead. You have up to 3 minutes. Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
Thank you, Councillor North. Firstly, draw members' attention to the addendum report with this application. The application is for a 2-storey side extension with a terrace at the front. There's an aerial image for you here. The property is within the Edward Square, Scarsdale and Abingdon conservation area. There are listed buildings also nearby. Here are some site photographs that show the application site from both Pembridge Square and from Earls Walk. The existing site plan and elevations. And then the proposed elevations here, you can see that proposed side extension. And it's in this location that there's this proposed terrace. I think this 3D visual is actually helpful to understand that arrangement. So it's the 2-storey side extension and the terrace to the front. Officers are recommending approval and happy to answer questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we do now move on to speakers. We have Mr. Bolton, Mr. Honour, Mr. Lynch. You have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Both myself and Tim, who lives at number 27, are nervous and worried about the overdevelopment of the site, because it's only going to leave less than a square metre on the ground floor left outside. Also, there's a balcony at number 27, Earls Walk, obviously, and that doesn't seem to be in any of the rights of light reports or modelling, although number 27 is much closer to the proposed site than number 20, which is the one that they've taken into consideration. We wonder if that should have been in the modelling, and if the planning officer did take it into account. If she did, then fair enough. That's a question we would just like to ask. And also, if you do consider granting the approval for this site, we would like to ask if you could place a condition on the site to change the use from C3 house to C4 and HMO. At the moment, obviously, they'll have the permitted right to do this. If you could place a condition on it, please, that they'd have to come back for planning permission and ask yourselves if they can change it to an HMO. That would be very gratefully received by most of the neighbours. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I just had a couple of comments on the planning officer's report rather than to rehash any of the objections. Obviously, this isn't permitted development, so there are 3 comments. The comment was that it was only 2.2 metres and therefore not harmful, and that's just a matter of scale. I mean, it can be harmful even at 2.2 metres. There was a comment about it was exempt from BNG, biodiversity net gain, but we shouldn't wholly discount biodiversity net gain, because if you do that to every small garden in the borough, obviously that would be quite catastrophic, so I think that's been dismissed too easily. And then the overlooking comment, particularly with respect to number 20 Pembroke Square, it says overlooking was only when occupants stand at the front edge. Overlooking would be rare and only really occur should the occupant choose to look. I thought that was rather peculiar. I would suggest that they've not properly considered the overlooking, as if the occupant chooses to look, that's not much of a test. But other than that, obviously just the objections already made. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have the agent or representative for the applicant here. Ms. Bryan, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members. I know some neighbours feel strongly about this application, and I respect that. I'm here to explain simply why the officer's recommendation is the right and carefully reasoned one. Your officers looked at this twice, pre-application and now, and recommend approval. They confirm both the principle is acceptable and that the impact on the surrounding area is acceptable, subject to normal conditions. We have followed their advice line by line. The proposed extension is a modest, subordinate, 2-storey side extension in matching London stock brick and traditional timber windows. The extension completes the ground floor base neatly but keeps a sense of space above. The sill and head heights align, joinery is timber and the bricks match. It sits comfortably in the local townscape and is respectful of the existing buildings. It reads as part of the house, not a new building. No change of use, no intensification, just careful increase of living space for its owners. The conservation area's character and appearance are preserved. The small gap at upper level remains. Roof build-up is hidden from public views. Detailing matches the host. Even if you see some change at ground level, it's neutral in heritage terms. In relation to amenity, daylight and sunlight, we did commission a BRE 209 compliant daylight sunlight report. It shows no material loss to neighbours' habitable rooms. No counter study has been provided. To avoid overlooking, we are happy to accept a privacy screen at 1.7 metres and obscure glazing, standard, effective and already proposed. The proposed blue-green roof and permeable finishes means runoff won't increase. The details of these elements can be conditioned. We are also happy with conditions on the construction management and any external services locations. Finally, some objectors talk about Airbnb and other uses. That's not part of this application. This is not a change of use. If any separate issue ever arose, the Council has enforcement powers, but any other land use is not before you today. We live here and we care about this as our home. We intend to build considerably, take on board reasonable conditions, and keep good relations with our neighbours. In short, heritage preserved, amenity protected, drainage managed, and conditions offered. Please follow your officer's recommendations to approve our application. Thank you.
Thank you. And now if I turn to my colleagues for any questions to the objectors or the applicant's agent. Thank you. Then we turn to officers. And could I, first of all, kick off by one point? It was mentioned by some of the objectors about questioning the use of this property. And I did check this out. And there is a separate investigation ongoing by other departments within the council. And as the applicant said, that does not form part of this planning application. That investigation is ongoing. So we are with the case in question. The question for the officers on the overlooking issue, and I'm familiar with the property and I have seen it. So I was just going to ask, is there any additional condition that we need to add to this or do we think that the wall in itself is enough of a reason to stop people peering over into next door's garden?
Yes, thank you. This was a key consideration for us because it was raised in the objection letters. And the way you would use the terrace at the front is the wall runs adjacent to it. You would have to go to the corner, the top kind of left-hand corner, and deliberately look over it. We believe that the wall as designed would provide enough of the screen to prohibit views, potentially not every single view, but enough to ensure the perception of overlooking and the actual overlooking is reduced to an acceptable degree. So officers are comfortable for that. And I can confirm what you said is correct, that the planning enforcement team can investigate anything in relation to any change of use.
Thank you. Colleagues.
Thank you, Acting Chair. So my question to officers is just in relation to the minimum requirement for outside space. I note in the pack it says that should be 5 metres squared, I believe, according to the London plan. And the officer response in that, it does say many homes in London do not meet this requirement, but many homes in London were built before that plan and before that 5 metre square requirement, and Victorian and older. So now that that requirement is in the London plan, I mean, shouldn't we really be asking for 5 metres squared of outdoor space if that's going to be developed? Is that a fair point? What would your response be to that? Thanks.
It's a good question. The policy requirement sits with the London plan for new residential development usually. But there are instances where you could apply it and you could say, I'm concerned about how much is being left at this property, and that would give you like a benchmark, something to look to as a guide. For this application, this home is well proportioned, it has access to other outside spaces in good quality areas in the vicinity. There is a first floor terrace retained that we were just discussing. So in no way I think that the lack of outdoor space would make it a substandard home. So we wouldn't be tipping into that realm. On balance, overall, taking everything into account, the quality is good enough, even though even if short of the 5 square metres, if that makes sense. And there is still an external space on the site, so that's why officers concluded that.
And if I may, Chair, so as you've just described, that part of the London plan you're saying is only for new developments. So is it a planning consideration that we can consider here tonight, that it doesn't meet that 5 metre square requirement, or would your view be that we can't consider that as a relevant planning consideration? Thank you.
I am just going to look up the exact wording, because I think the exact wording has left it. We have used it before. It's not worded in a. It's part of the housing design standards for new residential homes. So that's how you apply it, and you'd see that applied probably quite rigidly, especially outside of our borough, which is much denser, and it sometimes you need a bit of flex to deliver homes in what is such a constrained site, or such a constrained area. Sorry, but the exact wording of the policy, I'm just going to very quickly look up how it starts, because I think it can be applied. Sorry to make you wait, but I think it's a very valid question.
Please take all the time that you need. Thank you.
And I just got a new laptop, so my London plan isn't bookmarked like it normally is, so I apologise, it's just loading. You don't have it bookmarked ready, do you? Here we are. Sorry about that, and thank you for your patience. So it's within London Plan Policy D6 for housing quality and standards, and it says private outdoor space, where there is no higher local standards in the borough development plan, so we don't have a local standard. A minimum of 5 square metres private outdoor space should be provided for 1 to 2 person dwellings, an extra 1 square metre for any additional occupant. So there is enough within that, the explicit policy wording, you could apply it, but that's, again, your planning judgment in how you would interpret that policy.
Thank you very much. No further questions from me.
So, colleagues, are we at a position to make a decision on this, or are there any further comments to add?
I suppose I wanted to raise my reservations about the size of this extension. I think the 2 stories are possibly a little bit overbearing in terms of how it reads alongside the original building. And possibly if it was 1 story, it may be more acceptable. That's not what's before us, so I just wanted to flag that. Thank you.
And I'm very happy just to comment, Chair. I think that private green space and gardens, especially in central London, really does add a lot to the quality of life. So if officers are clear that the minimum requirements in the London plan are something we consider as a material planning consideration, then I would be minded to refuse upon that basis. But that's simply my view.
So, colleagues, can we then vote on it? And so the recommendation is to grant permission with the conditions attached. Can I see those in favour of granting? And those against? Permission is refused unanimously, and we need to have a reason for refusal. Yes, please.
I think listening to the discussion, with your permission to delegate the exact wording, I would say it relates to the bulk size and massing and the subsequent impact on the street scene and surrounding conservation area. And then we'll have a look again at the policy D6. We will either include it as a separate reason for refusal on amenity space or include it within that bulk size and massing and then the impact that has on the home. So we'll just explore that, but I think it's those two clear reasons.
So, colleagues, are we content to allow officers to finesse the wording of that?
Yes, I'm content.
Do we need a proposer? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you. Proposed by Councillor Lane and seconded by Councillor Durian. And so then we need to vote on that proposal. Those in favour of that proposal? Thank you. And that proposal is granted and carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I will now give the chair back to Councillor Siren.
Thank you, Councillor North. Is everybody content to continue? Yes? Okay. So we will move on to 23 Ifield Road. And who will be presenting this? Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Before you this evening is an application at 23 Ifield Road for the amalgamation of two existing maisonettes to form a single dwelling. This is a site location plan showing the site edged in red. This is an aerial view on the left-hand side of the screen and a view of the principal elevation from the street. This is the existing floor plan for the lower floor maisonette, known as Flat 23A. This comprises a 4-bedroom property arranged over 2 floors. It's of an adequate size. It has good access to natural light and ventilation. It's dual aspect and is of a good size. The application cover letter identifies this part of the building being used as a HMO currently. This is the existing floor plans for the upper floor maisonette, known as flat number 23. Again, this is a good sized 2-bedroom property arranged over 2 floors with adequate access to daylight and sunlight, dual aspect and good ventilation. The proposed floor plans show the building to be amalgamated and to be arranged over 4 floors to provide a large-sized dwelling occupying the whole house. This results in the amalgamation of the 2 units. Officer's recommendation on this application is for refusal on the grounds that the property would not comply with the borough's housing policy H10 and would see the net loss of a residential dwelling of a good size and would reduce the supply and choice of housing available, negatively impacting housing delivery within the borough. There's a second reason for refusal on the grounds that the proposal and the amalgamation would result in the loss of a HMO accommodation, which is against, again, the borough's housing policy H01 or H01 of the local plan. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have two speakers for this case, the agent and the applicant. It's Ms. Matthews and Mr. Moore-Pergo. Please go ahead. You've got 3 minutes. Go ahead when you're ready, please.
Thank you. The proposals before you tonight provide an opportunity for a much-needed larger family house sustainably located within the borough. The proposals seek amalgamation of 2 properties to form a family home. This property was originally a house and was used that way for over 100 years. It was only quite recently it was converted into 2 properties in 2009. The existing ground and lower ground floor flat is a small HMO C4 use. However, it must be highlighted that it is permitted development to switch it back to a C3 use without the need for planning permission. This should be a material consideration. Furthermore, the current layout of this small HMO is in need of change, as to get to the lower ground floor you must walk through the living room with the bedroom access directly off the living room, creating potential fire issues. Bedroom 2 has very poor levels of natural light and is well below the space standards at only 5.62 metres. There are also issues of damp. The first and second floor maisonette has 2 bedrooms but no amenity space. The larger family home is sought by the applicant to provide a family home to accommodate his wife and elderly parents. The need for housing in the borough is understood, but this should be weighed up against the need for larger family homes too. 23 Ifield Road was originally built as one house, and returning it to this will benefit the mix of housing in the area, as well as allowing this family to realise their vision.
Good evening. I fully recognize and respect the policy against amalgamation, which is designed to protect the borough's housing stock. I believe my situation, however, presents a necessary and justifiable exception that does not undermine the policy's primary intent. I've been a resident of this borough for 4 years. My partner and I are getting married next week and are preparing to start our family. Our goal is simple: to establish a permanent, stable family home right here in RBKC. Our parents are elderly, for the moment are independent, but we would like to have the opportunity to get them to live with us when they will need increased care. This house is not an investment for us. It is intended to be our single long-term residence where we plan to raise our children. This application isn't about building a bigger space. It's about choosing where we want to build our life. The challenge is that the current configuration is not suitable for a family. If we cannot combine these properties, we will be forced to sell and relocate outside of the borough to find a suitably sized home. Granting this request keeps a young family rooted in RBKC. We respectfully ask you to look past the general policy and consider the specific human context of this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Any questions for officers? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in relation to the exception that we have generally against amalgamations in relating to if existing homes are substandard. And I think specifically with relation to bedroom 2, I think it was mentioned 5.6 square metres with literal natural light and damp. I mean, even considering that there's a adjoining dressing room, I mean, that to my mind does not really seem fitting living conditions for a human being. You know, about 5 metres for their, they're not going to live elsewhere, are they, for their sole space? What would you say to that, and why don't you think that would fall within the exception we generally have to amalgamating?
Yeah. So looking at, it might be easy for me to put the plans up on the screen. Looking at the lower ground floor, flat 23A in totality, there's alterations that could be made to that flat to bring it up to a better standard without amalgamating the whole property. I take into account the points that have been raised with regard to bedroom 2. There is the additional kind of dressing room space it does have, which opens out onto the garden. But there are changes that could be made to the layout of this property which would result in a better quality of arrangement of spaces without the amalgamation of the top floor flat required.
Thank you. And then we also, if I may, Chair, if I may follow up with another question, we also heard some talk just more generally in relation to damp and fire safety. In relation to those objections, I know that our policy does specifically use the phrase safe and good quality HMO accommodation. So if the current accommodation has damp and has fire safety concerns, I mean, would that not fall outside that description of enable, safe and good quality?
So based on the kind of planning remits, I would say there's other legislation and kind of HMO licensing which would cover those aspects to make sure that they weren't substandard. Looking at it from a planning perspective, we're looking at the arrangement and quality of those spaces, and that's what we've made our assessment on.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Yeah, I mean, I am concerned about the quality of that lower ground floor layout and the issues that have been raised. Can I just ask about the HMO? I know that you say that that's a sort of second reason for recommending this for refusal. We heard from the agent about you can change the class use, so the CR3 to CR4 to CR3. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? I mean, I'm just wondering how much more important it is that this is an HMO. I mean, obviously, we understand amalgamations. We understand that for everyone that is allowed is another home that we have to find somewhere else in the borough. But that really has to be balanced with long-term residents of the borough, supporting families, and helping people to stay in the borough. So I'm really sympathetic to cases like this, but I think this is particularly interesting because of the HMO presence. Please just comment on that.
Yep, so the policy speaks to kind of HMOs and HMO accommodation being kind of lower cost accommodation and a form of housing in need by those residents who are unable to access market housing. So there is a protection for HMO on that basis, that it offers a form of housing to a different demographic who might be seeking housing in the borough, and that's why the protection is in place for it. There is permitted development rights that do exist for conversions of HMOs and dwellings, and that would be potentially a fallback position. However, that was not kind of presented in the application, and we've assessed it on the loss of the HMO dwelling in this instance.
Are you saying that any HMO can be changed?
There is a PD right to change from a C3 use to a C4 use and back again. But I think the issue here is that there's two dwellings, existing dwellings, and only one of them is being used as an HMO, and the application is to amalgamate both of them. So although one of them, which is an HMO, well, just say it's C4, it could change to C3 without, under PD, you'd still have two separate dwellings at the moment, and they want to amalgamate both of them.
No, I understand that. Maybe it's a sort of separate point, but I thought we protected HMOs, so I'm surprised that we can just change them with permitted development.
We do protect them. There is a local plan policy that protects them, which is why you've got the second reason for refusal. But we're talking about permitted development rights that are nationwide. They're not governed by the council. So there are other things that you can do where you don't require planning permission. And you can, there are changes between C4 and C3, but that doesn't mean we don't. We do protect them. Generally, we see them as valuable accommodation because they're low cost. But what we're trying to say is there are some permitted development rights, but they do not apply in this case.
So putting aside the amalgamation, they could change that HMO to
a self-contained dwelling, but there would still remain two in that building.
I got it. Okay, any other questions or thoughts?
I think, thank you, Vice Chair. I think on amalgamations generally, I would always look at the context of where the proposals are, the mix of flats and the configuration in the wider street as well. So I think those are, sort of from my perspective, a consideration, notwithstanding what the policy says. I think in this case, however, given that the proposal essentially is to combine a 4-bed and a 2-bed property, regardless of size, that is how they're currently used, I think I would struggle to make an exception for that.
I think the point you made Chairman, in relation to families is very important. You know, I think the rationale and the spirit behind that policy in relation to amalgamations is because we want to increase housing stock in the borough. We want families to be able to live in the borough. We want more people to be able to live here. I think more family homes is good, and that should be preferable to substandard housing that, you know, puts a person in a bedroom that's 5 meters squared. In my view, that is substandard, and people in London should not be living in that way. So I think, from my perspective, it would satisfy paragraph 5, spot 1.4 of the local plan and fulfil that exception. But that's just my view on the merits of this case.
Councillor North.
Yes, Councillor Lane's spot on with that. I exactly concur with him on that. I mean, I'm looking at bedroom 2 now with no window in it and a single bed, and it's not really the type of accommodation that we want to encourage. Yes, it could be changed, as the officer said, but on this particular case, I'm minded to have some sympathy with a growing family and possibly with senior parents moving in at some later stage. And it's certainly something that would be used as accommodation rather than to be bedsits or substandard properties in the future. So I'm minded to make an exception in this case.
Thank you, Councillor North. Okay, so I think we can probably reach a conclusion on this. The recommendation from officers is to refuse the amalgamation, 23 Ifield Road. Can those in favour of the refusal please show? And those in favour of approving the application to amalgamate? So it's... Ah, okay. Basically, the recommendation has fallen. Yes, so we need a proposal. Okay, got it. Sorry. Well, it sounds like people are in favour of an approval of the amalgamation. So, reasons.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the reasons are those that we've outlined, that although the borough does have a policy in the local plan against amalgamations, there are exceptions to that, and specifically 5 spot 14. We are permitted under the local plan to amalgamate if existing homes are substandard. There is a home, because it's an HMO, bedroom 2, that is of 5 meters squared without any real light. In my view, that is substandard. So that would be my reasons, but I'm eager to hear what others on the committee have to say as well.
I'm very happy with that. Anyone? Okay, so I think that's our... Yeah. Proposer and seconder, please. Councillor Lane to propose, Councillor North to second. So the proposal is... Okay, sure. Relevant. Yeah, okay. So the proposal, which has been proposed by Councillor Lane and seconded by Councillor North, is that we grant planning permission at 23 Ifield Road, subject to the normal conditions, which we will delegate to officers, for the reason that's been outlined by Councillor Lane. Okay? Right, we will vote on that now. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So planning permission is granted. Next up, we have got Ladbroke Road. And we have one speaker. Who's going to present this? Ms. Ray, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. So turning to the slides, this application is also for an amalgamation of 2 residential units and includes some minor works to the front of the property as well as listed in the development description. Turning to the aerial view, this is the application in its context adjacent to Kensington Park Road on Ladbroke Road. some site photographs showing the front of the property and the windows and so on that are referred to within the officer report. The existing lower ground and ground floor plans showing the arrangement of the two separate properties, and the proposed lower ground and ground floor plans once they have been amalgamated, existing elevations and proposed elevations. Officers are concerned again about the direct conflict with policy H01 and are recommending refusal for the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just 1 second here. Okay. We have a couple of speakers registered. Please do introduce yourselves and start whenever you're ready.
I'm the owner of the flats, which I bought in June 2022 with the aim of amalgamating them so as to house my parents, as they will need live-in care, and a more accessible flat with street-level access. In January 23, I applied for planning to amalgamate, which was granted in principle, but the freeholder wouldn't sign the Section 106 agreement, so we withdrew our application and I had to enfranchise. It was contested, so it took over a year, only to find that planning policy had changed in the interim, and amalgamations were far more restricted. We really hope to amalgamate so that we can have a bigger and more accessible flat, and I will also be doing up the building, which I hope will be of benefit to everyone in the borough and is supported by the Ladbroke Association. Although I do understand that RBKC does not wish to lose units, it also has a policy to encourage family accommodation, and I hope that our works, which would create a family flat with a garden, would be in accordance with that policy.
Hi, my name is George, and I work on the planning agent, work with Porty on this application. So the key considerations, I think, in the determination of this application are housing quality, housing need, and heritage. So in terms of housing quality, the existing flats provide suboptimal living conditions and provide accommodation which do not meet the minimum residential quality standards. So internally, the lower ground floor flat suffers from reduced headroom in the bedroom, which inhibits the usability of the space, whilst this bedroom also falls below the minimum space standards for even a single bedroom, being only 5.8 square metres. This flat also has a narrow and confined layout, restricting its practical usage, while also suffering from low natural daylight levels. In terms of externally, the upper ground floor flat doesn't have access to any private outside space, with the lower ground floor flat having exclusive access of the enclosed rear garden. This is contrary to the local development plan, which requires a minimum of 5 square metres of private external space per dwelling. So the impact of the amalgamation is that the proposed amalgamation would optimise the living space, provide a dwelling of much greater housing quality and with private outdoor space, meeting and exceeding the residential quality standards of the development plan. In terms of housing need, the amalgamation would meet identified need by creating a much-needed family house with 60% of the need of market housing in Kensington, Chelsea, being for 2- and 3-bed dwellings, and this would this could either be a 2-bed, as we've shown, or it could be a 3-bed as well with the size as well, being at 108 square metres. It could be converted to that as well and meet space standards. In terms of heritage, 11 Ladbroke Road originally had a front entrance stair, and by reinstating this original feature, the proposal enhances the character and appearance of the conservation area. And this is echoed by the Ladbroke Association, who support the application. And as demonstrated in our supporting submissions, the reinstation of the front entrance goes hand in hand with the amalgamation and cannot be undertaken independently on the subdivided flats without further detrimentally impacting the housing quality. So, in summary, the existing homes are substandard, and the proposal has the benefit of delivering a high-quality family-size home, meeting an identified need with an improved internal layout and external design, while there being no loss in residential floor space. The development, therefore, accords with the development plan read as a whole and should be approved.
Thank you. Who has questions? I have a question to the owner. Can you just explain again about how you came to own these flats and what happened with the planning permission? And I guess why I'm sort of asking is, we do have a policy, and I think, if we allow every one of these, we're going to end up in a real situation, with our housing stock. But, equally, I think there are exceptions, and I think we've talked about what some of those might be. but equally we also have to support our residents. So I'm just interested in your story.
My parents live next door at number 9 on the ground floor, and when the 2 flats came on the market next door, as my father eventually will need wheelchair access, I thought, well, I could buy these 2 and we could get him a bigger accommodation and they could have live-in help, etc. Unfortunately, the freeholder has been very difficult and wouldn't help in any way. So I put in for planning, I got it, but technically you need a Section 106 agreement to be signed when you have to do an amalgamation whereby everyone agrees there'll be no more amalgamations, and he just wouldn't sign it. So because we didn't have the piece of paper, we literally couldn't get planning. So I then had to withdraw and start enfranchisement, and that took well over a year because, again, it was contested. We were almost at the tribunal before we could finally reach an agreement. And by the time I'd done all of that, which was a year and a half in, I think, the plan had changed. And so then I'm now in the position where I have these 2 flats, but now it's not actually allowed.
Gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, Councillor North.
Thank you. Yes, just slightly moving to a separate issue, which is the conservation area and the Labrador Association, I notice, are in support of this application because of the improvements to the front facade and restoring some of its original intention and original features. Could you just explain to us exactly what you plan to do there, as well as the staircase I notice is involved?
Well, I mean, effectively, the building is in a terrible state and needs redoing. So we're going to restore the front and back of it and put back as many original features as we can, including the staircase, the garden, and so on, so that just put it back to how it once, as close as possible to how it once was.
And just going back to the point that was raised about the lower ground floor being not at the right head height and feeling that the accommodation is not adequate, can you just tell us a bit more about that, please?
Well, the problem is that the main staircase for the building does go through my bottom flat, and so part of the flat is therefore under the stairs. And so it's only 1.5 meters, I think, high. So it's not really usable other than, I suppose, maybe as a cupboard. The bathroom as well has been built as it's literally as wide as the bath. There is nowhere to actually move around in it. You have to climb into the bath. So again, that is certainly not optimal. And we'd have to therefore use a lot more of the flat to probably create a proper bathroom and therefore lose other space for bedrooms and so on. So it is a very tight configuration at the moment.
Any other questions or thoughts? Anything you'd like to raise with the officers? Councillor North.
There we go. Yes, again, another difficult situation because we obviously have an application that is against policy. I notice you've got community infrastructure levy in here. My question really is, do the officers feel that this proposal would have a positive impact on the heritage and particularly the conservation area in question? Because yes, it is a handsome building, and would this development enhance and add to the conservation area as part of this development? Is that the payback against losing 2 dwellings which are obviously of questionable quality?
Yes, we've attached some weight to the improvements to the front, but we believe they could be realised without the need to amalgamate, especially given we don't think there's any deficiencies in the size or quality of the homes, noting that the bedroom is labelled with the deficient head height and the other reception rooms. But yes, so we have given some weight to it, but not enough to outweigh the loss of a home.
I was also going to mention the point that Councillor North raised, but just if I can expand upon the head height points, I mean, 1.5 metres, that is very low. It's certainly not something that I could walk under. Would that not contribute towards the existing homes being somewhat substandard if a significant proportion of the ceiling height is 1.5 metres?
Potentially it could if it was only one reception room, one kitchen, but because we have 2 reception rooms at the back, the living, dining, and then kitchen, those spaces could be used differently, we believe. So there's definitely potential. It's just that this plan itself has been labelled with the bedroom in that area, so we aren't concerned about the overall quality.
Well, colleagues, I think we have to try and reach a decision. I mean, in my mind, this is, obviously it's our policy. We understand the policy. We understand the situation with our housing stock in the borough. But then you do get specific situations like this one, and perhaps it's unfortunate that we've had 2 in one committee, where there are specific circumstances and certainly a building that needs work, and it's hard to sort of see. Look, the policy is the policy, but I guess it's hard to see how we will end up with 2 really great units if we refuse permission tonight, because they won't stay in that ownership. They'll have to be, there's all sorts of knock-on effects. And, we have to support our residents. And, I would therefore be minded to allow this, obviously subject to the conditions and the what we talked about in the last instance. Clearly, there needs to be work done to this building to repair it and improve it. And I do see the kind of benefits of that. So that's my view. Okay, so I think we can move to a decision. The recommendation from officers is to refuse permission at 11 Ladbroke Road. Can those in favour of that recommendation please show? So, recommendation is not upheld, and I think we're all in favour of allowing this. Ms Bowery, perhaps you can help us with what needs to be done, because I will mess it up again.
I think hopefully Fiona can, I think substandard was one of them, but
I would actually suggest you don't use substandard, because the bedroom just could be moved into one of the reception areas. I'd go for the heritage benefits you noted, so the improvements to the front, and you've attributed them enough weight that it would outweigh the loss of the home.
Yeah, it's if officers think that the point around the enhancement to the character and appearance of the conservation area is a stronger one, then considering the view of this committee being minded to approve, I'm content with them dropping the point in relation to substandard, although I still think it's valid. It's better to perhaps go with the strongest points. So, yeah.
If that's okay, I just think it reduces any risk, because it's very clear that that is a you could argue, public benefit.
Sorry, Chairman, if you could just bear with me. I just want to double check on the. One of the reasons for overturning is the heritage benefits. Am I right? So, just in particular, which ones are they? Are they specific ones? The reason I ask is that they're part of the description of development, and some of them will be tied into the amalgamation, but others are not. I.e., they could under-implement. So I think if you're giving significant weight to heritage benefits, you might want to think about how we ensure that they are delivered. You could think about a condition that says something prior to the occupation of the amalgamated unit, because it's not being lived in, as I understand it, such and such needs to be fully implemented and so maintained. I just think if the weight, significant weight is being given to them, we want to see them brought forward in their entirety. You can, or you can include specific ones if you're so minded. I mean, things like the reinstatement of the front entrance, I would expect would be delivered anyway through the amalgamation. But things like the replacement windows, it's just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, and actually the council called it in councillor.
I mean, you've got the submitted drawings, haven't you?
Things that she mentioned, so I think this is a good point. So what should we include?
It can be. We can finalise the wording as a condition, because you're going to be adding other conditions such as time limit, compliance with the drawings. I mean, the compliance with the drawings only all that means is whatever works you do have to accord with the drawings, but you can under-implement a permission. You can come back and do it later on down the line, but there's no control or power generally in planning to force someone to fully complete something. So I think where you do have heritage benefits, we have added conditions that require the delivery of those at a particular point to ensure that they are tied in with the amalgamation.
As per the submitted drawings?
Yeah. So you could, something along the lines of prior to the first occupation of the amalgamated unit, the external works including so on and so forth must be fully implemented and so maintained throughout.
Because that's what the members are looking at tonight.
Yeah, it is. And it's definitely what Joanna Gardner said about the front and the, yes.
Yeah.
So I think we should definitely include that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay, Fiona? Fiona, yeah.
Did you have a proposer?
The proposal is to grant planning permission at 11 Ladbroke Road to amalgamate the two flats subject to the conditions that we've talked about, the improvements to the facade and the other public benefits that we've identified. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that is approved. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to 22 Redcliffe Road, which is an... sorry, just find it. Redcliffe Road, where is that? We don't have a presentation for this. There are no speakers. But I'm sure everybody's read their papers and understands the case. This is a lower ground infill extension with the addition of a roof lantern. I mean, there were objections raised about this. I mean, in my mind, it was a pretty modest extension, something that is similar to others that we have seen. So I felt quite satisfied with it, if I can find it. It's very modest, it's very small, and it is at lower ground floor. So although I read the objections, I couldn't really think why we would want to refuse this. So any other comments or thoughts? So the recommendation is to approve the permission, approve the planning at 22 Redcliffe Road, basement flat. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved. Next we have Acacia Walk. Just remind myself what that is. So this is the pedestrian gate on the council building. Again, I mean, an improvement for everybody who lives there. So I didn't have any hesitation in supporting this one. So the recommendation is to approve the installation of the pedestrian gate at Acacia Walk. Can those in favour please show? Thank you very much. So that one is approved. Next we have got Fernshaw Road, an interesting application, I thought. This is the addition of a boiler flue to the external wall. It's a retrospective application. And this is to do with a boiler flue, which can be seen from the street, but I didn't think was particularly unpleasant. But actually, I do have a question for officers, which is planning permission actually required for such an addition?
Yes, in this instance, a planning permission is required for the flue. There is generally a lot of permitted development rights around flues, but in this instance, because it's on the front of the dwelling, it requires planning permission.
And say we were just minded to refuse, what is the applicant supposed to do with the flue? Where is it meant to go?
I'm not sure. I would imagine they'd have to find another suitable location for it if that were the case.
Look, I think it's very modest. I don't think it's unpleasant. I don't think it takes away particularly from the front of the building. So I think we can move to a conclusion. So the recommendation is to approve the boiler flue at flat A26 Fernshaw Road. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved. Next we have 7 Halsey Street. which is this in the same pack. So this is the installation of a condenser unit to the front light well. And actually, I did have another question about, a question about this. One of the objectors talked about, I mean, obviously there's been planning, application planning is required, but one of the objectors talked about it wasn't specified what the acoustic enclosure was going to be in the planning application. And I think the sort of recommendation from officers was that we weren't concerned about that, but I sort of did have some concerns about it because people have to make planning applications which specify it, so I sort of didn't feel we could just dismiss it, but please let us have your...
Yes, I think this is a little odd one because it is specified, but it's in the noise report because it's a mitigation measure of the proposal rather than for character and appearance reasons. So it is in the noise report. However, if committee were concerned about the appearance or look of it, a condition could be included to require details to be submitted.
I think we should include it. I think if we're going to, you know, people have to specify things, I think we should ask for it to be specified. It's not particularly onerous or difficult to do, but I think we need to do things, I don't know, I mean, I think we should do it. So please let's include that as a condition. So subject to that condition, the recommendation is to approve the condenser unit at 7 Halsey Street. Can those in favour please show? Thank you very much. So that one is approved. Next we have got Hillgate Place. I'm sorry, what have I done wrong now? Oh, of course, the listed building. Yes, you're right. You're right. It's a listed building. Okay. So we need to consider listed building consent. So the recommendation is to approve the listed building consent at 7 Halsey Street for the condenser unit. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved. Hillgate Place. This is the roof terrace with the what was a glass balustrade is now a railings, which has been slightly moved forward. Any thoughts about this one? Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I note that this is in a very built-up area and has a lot of local interest. It happens to be in my ward, and I know that residents have written in on this one objection. So I'm just really asking the officers what the rationale was to change this from the balustrading I'm talking about. What was the rationale behind supporting it?
I think the original scheme was just for a glass balustrade setback, and I don't know the rationale for why they changed it, but I think as they built out the extant permission, at some point they changed the design and possibly didn't know they required planning permission, and are now applying to resolve it.
Thank you.
I mean, while we're on that subject, I mean, people have objected to this. I mean, I know this part of our borough quite well, and there are many black railing terraces like this, particularly in Hillgate Village, although the objectors feel that we would never approve something like this. So maybe you can just comment on that point, please.
Arguably, our preference is often for black metal railings because they're more traditional in terms of their appearance. People often think that glass is invisible or harder to see, but sometimes with the reflective it actually looks quite contemporary, especially in a context where you would naturally see you know, downpipes, drain pipes that would be more similar in terms of their finish. So generally speaking, our conservation and heritage team prefer black metal, so that's why we have no objection to this proposal.
And there is a comment also about it's not as set back as it was originally. And how did you consider and think?
I think they never proposed it to be closer, if that makes sense. I think if we originally considered it to be in this position, I don't think we would have identified harm. There's still a slight step setback by the very nature of how you use a roof terrace, particularly of that size. I don't think the overlooking would be so great with that additional area to warrant a refusal.
Okay. All right. So, Councillor North.
just to clarify, am I correct in understanding that this is not an uncommon type of feature in that area? It's that other properties have similar already?
Yes, as far as I understand it, looking at aerial imagery, there are other roof terraces in the vicinity, not directly adjacent of the exact same design and appearance, but taken in the round, black metal railings are not uncommon in that area.
Okay, so can we reach a conclusion? The recommendation is to approve the application at 18 Hillgate Place. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved. And I think that is the last... No, it's not. It's not the last. It's not the last. Dalgarno Gardens. Here we go. Dalgarno Gardens. Just remind myself. Sorry, it's been a long evening. I'm sure everybody is tired but weary. Oh yes, so this is the replacement of the windows at 90 Dalgarno Gardens, and we are the applicant. I mean, I think we absolutely support this kind of improvement, so we'll move straight to a vote. Can those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll try not to speak very much more. Right, 60 Oxford Gardens. Let's just remind myself about this one. Oh yes, this is the one, so we are the applicant, but there were just a couple of comments about flat 8, which is privately owned, and us changing the windows there. And I just wondered if we can just add a comment that somebody contact this resident, because they're saying that they haven't been replied to.
Again, it's really difficult. It's not quite the same as the Peabody application, where we can reach out and say the committee have actually asked you to do this. With this one, it's blurring the lines between local planning authority and then the council's housing team. So I would just encourage the person, if they are listening or note, to contact the housing team directly about any questions they have in relation to works at their premises. So we are only the decision maker in that respect.
Well, if you are listening, please do contact the housing team or one of us, and we will direct you. So subject to that, the recommendation is to approve the works at 66 Oxford Gardens. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved, and that is it. So I don't think there is any other business, so that concludes the meeting of today's Planning Applications Committee. Thank you very much, and thank you, officers.